Welcome to a community update from the Department of Senior Affairs. I'm your host, Ed Nunez. Today's title of the show is Clinical Research in Albuquerque, and with us to discuss that is Dr. Michael McGuire. He's a Lovelace Scientific Investigator at Lovelace Scientific Resources. Dr. McGuire, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Sure, you bet. One of the first questions we have for you, and I think a lot of people want to know this. I've lived in Albuquerque all my life, and I don't know what the background is. To what does the Lovelace name refer?
Well, it goes back to a physician who grew up in Missouri and went to medical school there and tried to practice there but developed tuberculosis. And at that time, people thought that being in the Southwest with the higher, drier, warmer climate was beneficial for people with TB. And there's actually a little bit of evidence that that was probably true. It didn't cure everyone, but it was worth a try. So he moved to Fort Sumner in 1906. In 1913, he moved to Albuquerque, and in 1922 established the first medical specialty group, a multi-specialty medical practice group, and called it Lovelace Multi-Specialty Clinic. And this went on for a number of years. He was very good at what he did. He was a surgeon in addition to practicing medicine. And in 1946, he was able to encourage a nephew of his, also named William Randolph Lovelace, to come to practice with him. This nephew was also interested in aerospace medicine and in aviation medicine and other things besides just practicing medicine. So it was his interest to add research and education to what the original Lovelace physician was already doing. And so in 1947, the Lovelace Foundation for Medical Education and Research was begun. And this was a big deal because with the added aerospace interest that Dr. Lovelace had, the first astronauts had their first examinations here in the old Lovelace Hospital.
All right,
yes.
I've seen pictures of the old Lovelace Hospital. I didn't mean to interrupt, Doctor. Go ahead.
Yeah. The Super 7, the ones who were selected, were all part of that group, and they had their first exams here. And if you see the movie The Right Stuff, then you'll see some of the same original old buildings that were able to still be used in filming some of that. But anyway, Dr. Lovelace was very good, and he continued the practice. The nephew was unfortunately killed in a plane crash in 1965. And after a time after that, following that, things changed for the community, and the family members who were still involved in that they had other lives going on. They were not able to keep everything going in running hospitals and so on. So that's changed since then. But the four companies that are still part of the original Lovelace, with the original Lovelace name, we're one of those four. Lovelace Respiratory Research Institute, our parent organization, is another one of those. And we do research, and we've kept that thing that the nephew, Randy, as he was called, that was what he was really, really interested in addition to practicing medicine. And so we've been able to participate in that and share in that legacy that he established. It's been very good for a long time.
Well, quite a legacy it is, and no question about it. What kind of company is Lovelace Scientific Resources? I don't know that a lot of people know what that is.
Right. There are different ways of doing research, and there are different types of facilities that do it. We are a clinical research site, and basically what that means is that we do medical research on projects using roadmaps that are called protocols, and we do our research exclusively on human volunteers. In other words, we're not involved in the basic research before a product or a technology or a device comes to the market. We follow the protocols that test these things for problems, for hazards, for effectiveness, and so on. It's very, very detailed work, and it's very tightly controlled by governmental entities and also the sponsors who are paying for the research to be done. But the fact that we're a clinical research site labels us as doing human research, but we can do it for a lot of people and can do a lot of different types of studies. We're a wholly owned subsidiary of the Lovelace Respiratory Research Institute, and they do predominantly basic or so-called bench research on many, many, many areas. They have extremely bright people who do research at the most basic level and for all kinds of sponsors, from the government to pharmaceutical companies, just like we do. But our part is just with human studies.
Let me ask you this: as far as the human volunteers, do they, is there any age requirement, body requirement? What kind of volunteers are you working on?
Almost every study that we do is going to involve people who have to be within a certain age range. But the study itself determines that. And that'll be one of the so-called inclusion criteria that are established by the company that's wanting us to do their study. They'll tell us if it's 18 to 55 or
and it could
7
vary
to 80.
From research to research.
Absolutely, and it does.
A lot of graphs, a lot of statistics, a lot of analysis.
Yes, always.
Boy, I'll tell you what, that's we'll get into more of that in a few minutes here. And the next question we have for you, Doctor, is how did LSR, Lovelace Scientific Research, begin?
Well, I mentioned our parent company, Lovelace Respiratory Research Institute, which is led by CEO Dr. Robert Rubin. They do predominantly the basic type of research. And in the late 1980s, they felt that it was a good idea to add a clinical research arm to what they were doing so that they could continue with what they're doing, and if they developed a particular material or drug or technique or a device, then it would be possible for us to help with that kind of research, because it is different once you begin using humans for your experimental models. More and more people become involved, from the government to the FDA to the NIH to the CDC, all of the letters, all of the salads, the letter salads. In addition to the companies that happen to be paying for the research and wanting you to do things for them. And so we became the wholly owned subsidiary of the Lovelace Respiratory Research Institute, but we do other projects beyond what the parent company promotes as well. So we're able to do a variety of things to do these protocols, which I mentioned are the roadmaps for doing research, especially when you're having to be so careful in using techniques on humans.
I would imagine. That's all I can do is imagine, and it sounds like a lot of entities involved here, a lot of organization, many communication lines have to be open. And so anyway, we'll get into some more of that, because my mind is racing about what you're telling me. I'm trying to group it all together. I can't do it as good as you, Doctor, but I'm trying.
Mine races every day.
So I think one of the other questions is, you mentioned how medical research is done. We asked that, right?
Yeah, basically, research starts because somebody asks a question. It all starts with a question. Some person is thinking about something they're interested in, and they wonder, I wonder if this medicine, which works on this, would also work on something else. How could I find out? Well, the how can they find out has to do with the research process, which starts from that question. The question also determines what kind of research method you'll use, and it determines what kinds of entities are going to do the research for you. But that's really how medical research begins. Somebody asks a question, and we're in a position to begin to help them answer those questions as well as we can.
The position, resources, a lot of things have to be in place for those kind of things to take place, and data to be gathered, and analysis and suggestions, or whatever the final results are going to be.
Absolutely.
And that takes a while, I'm thinking.
It
I
does.
really am. It's fascinating stuff here, it really is. Where do the projects come from?
They come from various areas, because the people who are asking the questions include folks like the large and small pharmaceutical firms. And so most of our drug studies will come from there. Although our parent company also does some research into agents that we need to do those research projects on. And so protocols have to be developed for all of that. There are other types of research. There's population studies. More and more it's becoming important to look at large populations of ethnic groups, of people who have specific habits, all kinds of things. And we have people who help us through the Respiratory Research Institute and also what we're doing at LSR to help with population studies. In addition, the question may come up from inside our own ranks. And when that happens, then we have to find a funding source, because all of this is very expensive.
Yes.
And if it comes down to doing research on a pharmaceutical agent, for example, even though we're not in a position to fund and handle all of the things that go with that type of research, most people don't know that if a person comes up with an idea for a medication, the time period from that point to the time that a pharmaceutical agent is proven to be effective and safe and winds up on a pharmacy shelf is 10 years.
At the minimum.
Yeah.
Right? So,
it can be longer.
Okay, yeah. I think it's important to know. Yes.
The cost for that averages $1.2 billion.
Wow.
Just like Carl Sagan used to say, billion.
Yeah, not million.
Not millions.
Billion. So 10-year process costs
Yes.
$1.2 billion.
And the president of our company is Darlene Harbour. Is one of those individuals who has an encyclopedic experience base and who understands all of the ramifications of preparing to do research, looking for other kinds of research, performing research. And so we can do just an awful lot of things, but everyone has to understand the time scales are very significant. And so what we do usually winds up being a 1 or 2 year piece out of that. And it's also done not only by our company, but many other companies in parts of the world. We're doing research right now with a company that's based in Russia. There's no subterfuge involved, I assure you.
Right, I understand that, Doctor. I'm sure that's people right away, they're going to hear Russia and, they're going to think something. I appreciate you saying that.
This has been a very good company to work with because of how careful they've been. There are things that have to be monitored for doing things the way that we do them here compared to the way that they do them in Europe and other parts of the world. But basically the protocols come out looking pretty much the same. And so what we care about is that roadmap and our ability to follow the roadmap. And if we're able to provide the staff and so on to do that, then that's where we are. It also requires people in the front office who are able to do contracting, who are able to do work on the regulatory end of things and compliance, and even people who are capable at recruiting subjects who are interested in coming to be part of this. And then as time goes by, we get to also the folks who actually do the work. I do the smallest part of it, probably. I'm responsible for all of it, but I have people working for me and with me that are just amazing in how they're able to do this kind of work.
A lot of components to this team, Doctor.
A lot of moving parts.
Whole bunch of components.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you just real quick on the side, this isn't written down here, but the roadmap, I gather that changes once in a while too. I mean, is it the same roadmap all the time?
Once we start a given protocol, it has to stay the same from then on. But every company is going to have different things in their protocols.
Okay.
So yeah, the roadmap changes, and particularly the clinical research coordinators who are the real drivers in the active part of the protocol. They have to know all of these details. And we're doing 8 or 9 studies simultaneously now on everything from rheumatoid arthritis to GI issues to breathing problems with COPD, emphysema, and so on, and others. And the coordinators have to know where to get the information about exactly how to do every single thing, and they do it day after day after day with incredible ability.
Efficiency too, I would guess. You got to be efficient on those studies.
Yes.
Yes, I mean, the
Yes.
things you're describing, I'm
Where
just,
where they're involved, it's important to do it just right.
Oh, man. Anyway, the next question we had is, what is LSR's structure for doing research?
Well, I was just naming some of it there, kind of jumping ahead in my questions. But in addition to all of the things that Ms. Harbour does and the oversight part that I do and signing things and helping to ensure that things are done safely. In addition to that, we have the coordinators, we have laboratory staff and special technology staff who have to be involved as well. And these are people that not only do their jobs extremely well, but who also make the patients, or I call them patients because I'm so used to doing that after 40 plus years of being in practice. But they're actually subjects or volunteers. And the things that we do to them are things that could make people nervous or uncomfortable if they don't know what's going on. And our staff is extremely good at explaining everything before anything is done. There's no question what needs to be done and how to be able to do it. And that goes all the way from one end of the personnel issue to another. We have really, really good folks that help us.
Oh, you'd have to do what you're doing. There's no other way, I would
Absolutely.
think. Doctor
Yes.
would want to jump ahead of this question. Who sees the subject and performs the mechanics of the protocol?
Particularly the coordinator, like I mentioned, but during that same visit, it's very likely that our laboratory person will also see them and draw blood or help with some of the testing that needs to be done. And in addition, there are other personnel in the office who have special technologies available to them in terms of breathing tests and work like this that are working with us all the time. So it's a matter of each person doing their part of the protocol. And with the protocol being laid out as strictly as it is, then it's fairly obvious what needs to be done at each given visit, because every protocol requires multiple visits. It's very uncommon for us to do a study that only has one. We've had a study like that, but that's unusual. Most of them are going to require the person to be back in the office over a period of time.
Right.
And it may be 1 to 2 years where they would be in the office monthly, every couple of months, or in some cases on the shorter studies, they would be in as much as every week. But all of this, again, is laid out in the protocol, and we continue to perform that.
I see. Doctor, we're almost at the end here, but I got 2 more questions for you. What happens when a volunteer comes in to begin participating in a protocol?
Well, they're met at the front door by a very pleasant, welcoming staff. And they are then met by the coordinator who comes to the front desk to meet them. The coordinator who is going to take care of their part of the process for this one individual. And they'll take them back to a nice quiet room, and they will do what turns out to be just about the most important part of any protocol, and that's the obtaining of informed consent. Informed consent gets a bad name when somebody just puts a form in front of you and says, sign this. It says that you understand all of this. Informed consent is a long, drawn-out process in medical research because there are a lot of things that go on, a lot of things the person needs to understand. In some cases, some potentially serious, harmful, and adverse events. We really screen studies pretty well. We're not going to take studies that have a high likelihood for disaster. That doesn't make any sense to do that. There are more than enough studies that are important to do without that. But the coordinator it's very common for them to spend 45 minutes going through the form, having the person read the form, being sure that they're able to read the form. If they can't read it, a person can come along with them, read the form and explain it to them, or read it out loud to them. But at the end of the time, then the person, the subject, the volunteer, is encouraged to ask any and every question they can think of. And our coordinators know many things to add to that anyway, to make sure that the people understand what's going on. At the end of that process, it's also important for them to understand, for the volunteers to understand, that they can terminate the process any time they wish. They can stop the next day after they sign informed consent. They can stop the day before the end of the study. Obviously, we prefer that that not be the case, but they have that option. And so no one is locked into something that they can't get out of.
That they're uncomfortable with.
Yeah. But once informed consent takes place, then we can begin to set up the time schedule for when the various procedures and office visits take place. And they will know when those times are. They'll know how to take a medicine if they are going to be taking one. And usually that's the case. Most of this is in pharmacology and agents related to specific illnesses. And once those things are done, the person has a real overview, not just a 30,000-foot view, but a real overview of what's going to happen, how long it's going to take, and what their responsibilities are. And we do a good job of that. The coordinators and the other staff who assist with all of this do a very good job of that. So we're comfortable that when someone agrees to be part of this, and this is important for every site that does research. It's not just us. We just feel like we do it extremely well. It's important because if this were a family member of mine, I would want it to be done properly, courteously, and I would want to be treated like an intelligent human being
Right.
who
Dignity,
understands
respect,
what's
right.
going to go on.
Mm-hmm. Volunteers. I just want to make this clear. Nobody gets paid. These are volunteers.
The majority of studies involve remuneration for things like time that's spent for distance that they may have to drive and things of this sort. One does not get rich being in research studies, but almost always there is some remuneration that makes it worthwhile.
Yeah, because people are going to want to know that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which leads us to our last question here, Doctor. If someone in the audience is interested in finding out more about participating in a research study, do you have a website and possibly a contact number for them?
We do. The contact number is our office number, area code 505-348-9500. And our website for this particular kind of issue is LSR Trials, TRIALS, it's all together, small letters, LSR Trials .com.
Doctor, wrap it up for us. You've been great. I've learned a lot about clinical research in Albuquerque. There's a lot to learn. Wrap it up for us.
Albuquerque is full of good research and good people who are doing the research. We feel very blessed to be able to be one of these organizations. We're busy and we're always eager to do more. And we'd be glad to help anytime a person would like to be involved.
And you just gave them the number on the website. Dr. Michael McGuire, Clinical Research in Albuquerque, thanks so much for being our guest today.
Pleasure.
You bet. For the Department of Senior Affairs, I'm Ed Nunez.